story that's definitely not getting enough attention right now, and it needs to be talked about. And it's about this woman named Bevelyn Williams, who was ordered to turn herself in on, I believe it was October 16th, to begin her 3.5-year sentence in federal prison. So who is this woman and why is she facing such a significant punishment? Because it sounds to me, based on that particular sentencing, that she must be some kind of out of control criminal. She must have burned down a building or attacked police officers or marched in the streets threatening to dismantle the American system and threatened violence against anybody who stood in her way and burned an American flag while she was at it. I mean, that's what you would think of when you think of a 3.5-year prison sentence in a federal prison, but that's not even close. So if you've been paying attention over the last few years, you know that our justice system has become increasingly more based on politics and used as a weapon to target people who the left sees as a threat to their regime, or to go after people that they think might inspire others to stand up to them. And thus far, it's been really easy to focus on this tyrannical machine who like to call themselves Democrats, but they're really authoritarians, and to focus on how they've specifically targeted Trump, throwing everything that they can at this man, inflating his crimes, placing one set of standards on him while their own side does the same things and gets away with them, or how their criminal behavior just goes completely ignored entirely. But the worry, of course, has been if they can do this to Trump, then they can do this to us. But that is not a past tense scenario these days. The justice system is currently being used to target conservatives, and anyone who sets a toe out of line, or it's being used towards people that they can make an example of, like Daniel Penny when he took out that guy that was harassing people on the New York subway. And we can see how the justice system is just becoming increasingly unjust. So again, one of these stories that has recently been circulating on social media that's not been getting enough attention is about this woman. And let me just pull up her. Oops. I'm just clicking all the wrong buttons today. Her name is Bevelyn Beatty, and she's going to tell us, I'm going to play a clip and she's going to tell us exactly what happened. But just to set this up, 4 years ago in 2020, as the world was completely shut down due to this super virus, Bevelyn noticed that, interestingly, one of the things that stayed open consistently were abortion facilities. And that didn't sit right with her. So she organized a rally/protest outside of a Planned Parenthood in New York, where she was living at the time. And a group of people gathered outside of this facility to peacefully protest and pray for the women who were going to go through these procedures. There were police present at the time at this rally, and there were no incidents of violence. There were no altercations. She didn't have any interaction with the police officers. There were no warnings, no indications that anything was wrong. And from what I know, there were no incidents involving anybody at the facility. So everything was fine. Police officers showed up to make sure that nothing got out of line. But from what we know, there were no situations where the police actually had to get involved, which I think is important to remember. So everybody went home. This was, I believe, a 2-day event, but everybody went home. It wasn't until later, and she specifically points out that this was after Trump was out of office, that now there were charges being brought against her. And in 2022, after so that was one set of charges that were brought against her. And then in 2022, after the Dobbs decision, she found out that they had drummed up even more charges against her for the same incident. And it was at that point that it was taken to a federal level. So I have this clip here. It's about 3 minutes long, but I do think it's important to hear how this all played out and have her kind of explain what's going on. And again, this is really important to understand because this is something that I've heard multiple times happening. It's becoming more frequent. So when we want to talk about our rights and our justice system, this is what we need to be aware of.
Well, what's so crazy is that I'm indicted right now. Indicted, I was found guilty, and I'm sentenced to 41 months in federal prison for preaching the gospel in front of an abortion clinic. Exactly that. The event happened in 2020, okay? Police were on site both days of the event. I was not arrested. I was not detained. I had no type of charges or forthcomings with the police at all. Once Trump was out of office, they sued me on an injunction to keep me 30 feet from the building. And so because I had moved to Tennessee, I just went and settled without admission of guilt because I was no longer in the state. Um, and then in 2022, right after Dodson was overturned, they beefed up the charges and indicted me on a federal charge with the secret grand jury that they had that I was not aware of. And they indicted me with face and conspiracy of face for the exact same event that I wasn't arrested at, that I had no kind of police encounters with. The police were on site there, and they went ahead and indicted me for face. Basically, they said things like me saying, no peace for the wicked, and we cancel this place in the name of Jesus. Those are forms of threats. Me talking to women, and I think one day of the 2-day event, 150 women were scheduled to do abortions. None showed up. That they considered that obstruction. You're interfering with women's care. And I'll never forget this. Before they sent the jury back to deliberate, the jury was told, this is not about the Bible. This is not about religious beliefs. This is about women's rights. And I was devastated to see the jury come back with a guilty verdict, but to preach the gospel and preaching things out of the Bible that may seem warfare, it may sound like warfare, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm invoking threats and violence. I'm speaking in the spirit. So yeah, they found me guilty, and the judge sentenced me to 41 months in prison. And what's so crazy is that my lawyer, who's appealing it now, he said in normal cases, something like this wouldn't have even gone federal. And he said for them to sentence you to 41 months, which the judge said in front of me, she said, well, I'm going to make an example out of you. You had 65,000 people watching you at a time, and people need to know what the consequences are when you interfere with women's rights. She said it straight up. And so they didn't care about me being a mother. They didn't care about me being a stay-at-home mother. They didn't care about the fact that I'm not a repetitive offender. Didn't care less. They gave me 41 months and 2 years supervised release.
All right. So that is what is happening with her. And just as a side note, you guys have heard me talk repeatedly about how the issue of abortion has been used as this massive tool of manipulation. That's all it is at this point. It has nothing to do with healthcare, has nothing to do with women's rights. It has become this cult. And they're trying to, it's become a cult for women. And of course, they're now trying to make it a cult for men. But they really have made it seem like abortion is the be all and the end all of our rights in America, which is vile because it goes against the good and righteous values that our country was founded upon. But this is just another way that it's been used as a manipulation tactic, because this judge literally told this jury that they need to put abortion above the Bible, to prioritize abortion over their belief in God and Jesus Christ. And she didn't even say, this is about the law. They said this, it was about one belief system versus another belief system. To me, that speaks volumes. So she was supposedly in violation of the FACE Act, which is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, which is something that was signed in, I believe, during the Clinton administration, but it's rarely been brought up or used. And what I really think is important to note is also that everything that is being thrown at this woman should have been used against every single one of the thousands of violent protesters in 2020. Every single one of the protesters when the college kids were shouting in favor of Hamas and blocking Jewish students from going to their classes and threatening Jewish students with violence. And some Jewish students were actually attacked and physically harmed. But because Bevelyn, she's being charged with a non-violent crime for unlawful assembly. That's the only thing on her paperwork. Yet she's facing one of the highest sentences ever passed to someone with this type of accusation. And then, of course, we saw that there were countless other protesters who were actually violent, and they had their actions dismissed because they were fighting for the right cause. They were fighting for something that aligns with the left, like burning down buildings and supporting terrorist organizations. So we have a little bit of an article here that just kind of describes a little bit more about what Bevelyn is being accused of. And it says Williams will be surrendering to a nonviolent, low-level facility for unlawful assembly for 3.5 years. Her attorney, in the meantime, will appeal the judge's denial for her to stay home, as her full appeal goes to the appellate court. She hopes she will be able to return home in the next month to be with her family as she appeals her full conviction. According to Williams, the judge told her that she was a danger to the streets and society, and that's why she refused her request to remain at home during the appeals process. So all of this is about, and this is Bevelyn speaking. She says, all of this is about me being violent, all of this stuff like that. Don't let the media play you. I'm going to jail, and my category of offense is unlawful assembly. I'm going to jail for 3.5 years for unlawful assembly. I believe that speaks for itself. And I completely agree, because she's not being charged with anything violent. She said herself repeatedly that during those protests, she had no interaction with the police at all and didn't even know that she had done anything illegal until months later, and they brought this case against her. So the question, of course, is, does the punishment fit the crime? And there's this other guy that I follow on TikTok, and I really enjoyed his take on it. So let's listen to just a little bit of what he had to say. Here we go.
Last week, pro-life activist Bevelyn Williams was sentenced to 41 months in federal prison for blocking the entrance to an abortion clinic in New York. In June 2020, Bevelyn and a friend defied COVID lockdowns and protested while blocking the doorway to the main entrance of a Lower Manhattan Planned Parenthood. She was just convicted and sentenced for violating the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, the FACE Act. Yes, that's a real federal law, thanks to Bill Clinton and Chuck Schumer. A rarely prosecuted crime. The mother of a 2-year-old daughter just got sentenced to 3.5 years for violating it. Federal courts said that she threatened patients and staff members at the Reproductive Health Center, aka abortion clinic, and pressed her body against the door, refused to move, injuring the hand of a volunteer. Can we just pause and think about that for a second? Summer of 2020, when people were in the streets almost every single day, protesting for BLM, blocking roads, major highways, entrances to government buildings, hospitals, people's personal homes. One of the only people to get in trouble for that entire summer is a Black Christian lady protesting in front of an abortion clinic, preaching and praying and turning girls around. 3.5 years in federal prison for blocking an entrance. Seems extreme, doesn't it? During Bevelyn's sentencing, the prosecutor said that a harsh penalty is deserved because due to her protest, 150 women that were scheduled did not show up to get their services. Who is this U.S. attorney that pushed for such a harsh penalty? Bevelyn Williams started his career as a law clerk under Judge Merrick Garland, recommended for U.S. Attorney Southern District of New York by Chuck Schumer, appointed by Joe Biden. U.S. Attorney Bevelyn Williams is best known for overseeing the Ghislaine Maxwell case and handling of the FTX Sam Bankman-Fried case. Black Christian mother protesting BLM and abortion. They couldn't let that happen. Needed to make an example.
So I think that says a lot about what is going on here. And I mean, Bevelyn has said that she didn't hurt anyone and she didn't injure. She has disputed the claim that she injured a clinic worker's hand. And I honestly think that if that was actually going on, then she probably would have had more of an interaction with the police. But as we know, at the time, the police were hesitant to interact with anybody at any kind of rally because they were being attacked. But in my opinion, the danger that this judge thinks Bevelyn is to society is the danger of speaking out against abortions and talking women out of killing their babies. And the example that she is trying to make out of Bevelyn is not about breaking the law. It's to send a message to pro-lifers that we need to stay silent entirely. And this is why it was so infuriating to me. Probably, I mean, it's not as bad now, but probably a couple of months ago, when people would get upset about Trump not being pro-life enough because he has said he won't sign a federal abortion ban. But, I can understand not liking Trump's position, but at least under Trump, we will continue to have the right to fight for babies. But under Kamala Harris, I wholeheartedly believe that that work is going to stop. And the example that they're setting with Bevelyn Williams, at least in my opinion, and what seems to be supported by evidence of their own actions, is what they will do on a broader scale if Kamala Harris gets into the White House. Because, I mean, ultimately, I think none of us have a problem with using people as an example for what happens when you break the law. I would love to see this administration use the military and go after every single one of these Venezuelan gangs and show them what happens when you pull the crap that they're pulling right now, when you try to take over apartment complexes, when you threaten people. I would love it if they would lock people up who steal and assault innocent people and say, if you terrorize a community, you're going to go to jail. Because consequences are a great deterrent. But all of the things that I just listed are just a few examples of what is being allowed to happen in this country, while the only person that they want to make an example of is someone who stands against abortion. So that's the message that they want to send, is to silence the pro-life movement. The last thing I want to show here, this was actually a video of Bevelyn Beatty's husband and what he had to say as he was taking his wife to serve her sentence at this federal facility. So here is that.
So right now, I'm about to drive my wife to a federal facility she has to surrender herself there. And this is due to the Harris-Biden administration. And any husband in this country, anyone that's married knows, any mother, any father knows that separation from your loved one, separation from a mother and a daughter at 2 years old is traumatic, and no American citizen should have to experience this in this country. Obama has the audacity to speak to black men and tell black men they need to vote for Kamala Harris, when Kamala Harris administration has separated me from my wife and my wife from her daughter at 2 years old for unlawful assembly. My wife is facing 3.5 years for unlawful assembly and federal time, y'all. Okay, federal time. And it's devastating for our family, but we're going to get through this. But I want people to know in this country, mothers, fathers, single mothers, that this cannot be tolerated. And you should not vote for Kamala, because voting for Kamala would do things like this, right? It's unacceptable. And yeah, that's what I have to say. That's what I have to say regarding that. The Biden-Harris administration made me a single father. I always envisioned growing up to be married and have my child, and that's what we did. We did things the right way. Even if you don't do things the right way, you don't make a father a single father. You don't do things like that. And for the fact that Obama is going to go lecture black men and tell black men they need to vote for Kamala Harris, and this is what she's doing to black families in this country. She's been doing this even in California, if you look at her record. So Americans, go out and vote, but I encourage y'all, I implore y'all to vote for number 45, Donald Trump.
Google, mommy gonna miss you. I love you so much. I love you, pretty girl. And I love you too, baby.
So right now,
Oh, that is just... So yeah, she has a 2.5-year-old daughter. She is getting ready to go spend 3.5 years in federal prison, being separated from her child. And again, this isn't this is not about not facing consequences, but I think it is blatantly clear that these consequences have been inflated because of the situation, because of what Bevelyn stands for. And this husband is going to drop his wife off to spend time in jail for standing up for babies. And he now has to figure things out as a single dad for the next couple of years.